In the first episode of this series, I mentioned that I had spent several years studying with people of different faiths, and I believe now is a good time to delve a little deeper into what I learned. If you've ever spent 5 minutes talking to me about something that I'm really into, you'll learn that I'm very process-driven. When I talk video games or Dungeons and Dragons, my fixation becomes apparent when I start to get into the specific rules or processes that enable X, or why this specific character is overpowered. When I get into personal finance, insurance, or mortgages, my explanations focus more on the why and how certain systems function and how I'm best able to manipulate various factors or variables to maximize the return for my clients. When I talk faith, my personal drive is to understand how a particular belief or system works on a fundamental level so that I may best learn how to incorporate it into how I believe the world to function. Believe it or not, this all started with a pair of Mormon missionaries. Now, I have read the Book of Mormon and had many discussions on the contents within. Without diving down that particular rabbit hole, I had some personal disagreements with aspects of that book, such that I elected not to use the book itself as the foundation for my personal belief system. Now, that's not to say I learned nothing from my exposure to that particular faith. Far from it. Even though I had personal disagreements with the historical fundamentals of Mormonism, I was nonetheless impressed by the personal bearing of those missionaries. Okay, try this. Go up to someone who cares very much for a particular hot topic, such as abortion, the trans movement, or politics. Tell that person that you think they're wrong and back it up with your personal convictions. Chances are you're going to not experience the most civil of responses. When I did the same thing to those missionaries, instead of learning a whole new batch of colorful Mormon-based insults, they engaged in a constructive back and forth to identify the source of our theological differences. In the end, once it was clear that I was not going to sway from my own path, they accepted my choice with genuine happiness, because even though I was not strong in their faith, I held a strong belief in a faith that was my own. Past that, I admired their particular sense of family values and family advocacy, and how ready they were to talk about why they did certain things. That really got me thinking. I had been raised as a non-denominational Christian. Baskin-Robbins has fewer flavors than there are flavors of Christianity, each with their own take on faith, values, and how to properly walk in that faith. Outside of Christianity, there are even more belief systems that all advocate certain behaviors with the goal of eternal salvation. With so many different beliefs, how does one learn which particular belief is the right one? I've been told that I'm rather dense when it comes to matters of qualification. You either are pregnant or you aren't. You either are financially able to purchase a car or you are not. You either are lying or misrepresenting a fact or you aren't. To my mind at the time, and to be honest, the minds of many people out in the world, you either are going to receive eternal salvation or you are not. This was my mindset at the start of my period of religious exploration. Is baptism a requirement to salvation? What about a strict adherence to a daily prayer schedule? Is there a ratio of religious observances that one must maintain if they wish to attain salvation? The further I progressed with a right and wrong mentality, the more concerned I became. There are over 7 billion of us down here on this earth. Of those, around 1/3 or approximately 2.5 billion report themselves as Christian. Of those, around 1.3 billion consider themselves Catholic. Within Catholicism, there are 2 main branches, Western rites and Eastern rites. And from there are 24 different subtypes of the Catholic faith, each with their own particular beliefs, observances, rites, and rituals. If we operate on the belief that there is only one particular way to attain salvation, only a tiny portion of our population will get to paradise, with everyone else who has ever lived not going there. My mind fixates on South Park, of all things. In the first South Park movie, there's a scene where Kenny's soul leaves his body and he ascends towards heaven, which has a highway sign posted on a cloud next to the pearly gates. On that sign is stamped something like population 11,000. Kenny is ultimately denied entrance to heaven and is cast down towards hell, which has its own population sign. Except hell's sign isn't a fixed sign, it's a rotary ticker that's spinning wildly, ticking population of over 900 billion and increasing every second. Yeah, pretty grim. My first major mental shift occurred after a good friend of mine got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. His diagnosis was terminal. With how it had spread, his doctors projected a less than 4% chance of survival and projected him 6 months to live. I saw the port my friend had surgically implanted into his chest to undergo chemotherapy treatments. I watched his hair fall out, his eyes sink, and his skin sallow. I watched his muscle mass wither away. I heard from his family of his confinement at home because his immune system was so compromised that he couldn't re-enter the world. He suffered. Still, in the face of what doctors diagnosed as terminal, he fought. He fought for his children. He fought for his wife. He fought for his family and friends. He fought because he's a tough bastard who was going to ensure that if death came for him, the Reaper wouldn't come out of the scuffle unscathed. My friend fought against all odds for a lot of reasons, but among that number is a simple truth. We, human beings, don't go quietly into the night. My friend survived, by the way. Now, back to what awaits us. Worst case, that South Park reference is truer than I hope. Because we have no way of knowing which faith carries the golden ticket, most of us are doomed. And there's nothing that we can really do to change that. With this in mind, I decided to start thinking on a different track. Maybe true salvation lies less in the dogma of how you demonstrate your faith, but the adherence to the principles that faith is founded upon. Okay, with that particular mindset, I was faced with the next area of focus. What exactly are the principles that shape faith? Here's where things start to get really fun. There are a lot of different religions out there, and from a general perspective, they're all rather different. I mean, you have Christianity in all its flavors, which believes that God sent his son, Jesus, to suffer for humanity and free them from sin. Judaism follows a similar path as Christianity, but they don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. Followers of Islam believe that Jesus was certainly a prophet of God, but revere Muhammad as the most perfect of God's messengers. That's just traditional monotheism. Hindus believe that everything in creation is a direct part of God, but there are also aspects of the supreme God that manifest as subordinate deities. Shintoism follows the belief that gods and other spirits are all around us and can even be directly interacted with. Buddhists believe in a cycle of reincarnation that is ultimately broken when a soul achieves perfection and is permitted into paradise. All that said, if you really boil things down, every major human religion has several core components which, taken together and applied to everyday life, are generally accepted as a strong moral foundation. Seriously, as a general rule, all major religions tend to advocate temperance and thoughtful behavior. These religions urge their followers to avoid unjust violence and strive to instill veneration for family bonds. As a student of history, I strongly believe that faith is what separates man from monster. Think about it. A society founded upon faith, regardless to its specifics, is a culture that, at the very least, is founded upon values that supersede the individual. Yes, history is ripe with examples of cultures that took their faith to uncomfortable extremes, but on the whole, most successful cultures that have walked this earth found themselves based upon faith that extolled the virtues of service above self and respect for the community. All this in mind, I began to understand what faith meant to me. The me part of that last sentence is very important. Faith is a very personal facet of one's being. Faith is what drives us to persevere against strong adversity. Faith is what fortifies us against the certainty of misfortune, pain, and ruin. Even when faced with the death of loved ones, faith convinces us of a better future and instills within us a resolve to carry on. Faith is personal, therefore, it is important that my own faith is personal to me. This calcification of what I am now describing as my faith took many years to develop and form. It started as a simple phrase, be good. My faith called me to be good. As life tested me, that seed of faith was also tested. What is it to be good? How does one measure it? How is it defined? How does it compare to similar measures or definitions? Like many before me, my faith was colored by my upbringing. the values of my parents and my community, the values that were instilled within me by the Marine Corps, the values that I had adopted over the years as I had determined them to be good. One of my fixations is the study of different Bibles because it fascinates me the way that individual human minds shape that particular book in different ways. For example, in Greek, there are 7 different words for love. Yet in English, we merely have one word for all 7 different uses. Even between English versions of the Bible, different human conditions, periods of time, and cultural happenings resulted in the same story being tailored and woven into something particularly unique. I like to think of my own personal faith as following the same path. My faith is special to me as it has grown in the cumulative experiences of my life. When I have the opportunity to share my message, it is this final aspect of my faith that I believe most important to share. Faith is something that must be cherished, nurtured, and above all, held dear. In the complicated world we find ourselves in, it is all too easy to let our connection to something greater than ourselves fall by the wayside, become marginalized, or corrupted. Faith isn't merely a thing to admire and put on a shelf. It is a force that guides and shapes everything it interacts with. It is the comfort against fear and the promise of a greater meaning to this single existence. Regardless as to the timbre or tempo of your own faith, take efforts to make it your personal faith. Guard it jealously and share it freely. Live that faith and let it lead you to a happy, fulfilling life. Mine does. It may not be perfect in all senses of the word, but it's perfect for me.